This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and I'm with Robin Horsley, the campaigner who and publisher of the Battle for Guildford video, who's campaigning about high-rise development in the town centre. Thank you for joining the Guildford Dragon, Robin.
Thank you, Martin.
And straight into the questions then. You've recommended that voters don't vote for R4GV or GGG. What difference will voting for candidates from other parties make to the North Street proposal, which has already been refused?
Okay, so yeah, R4GV, their councillors voted for the scheme. GGG's leader voted for the scheme, and so did the Labour Party. And since then, they've confirmed the position that they for the scheme. So, what difference will it make? Well, I think, and I hope, we'll see that this campaign has illustrated the level of opposition to the scheme as proposed, and therefore I think that will probably affect the position of the council. And what people will need to determine now is what likely differences that will make. For example, at the things that you have the other night, the Conservatives committed to, I think it was no higher than 8 stories for development in that area. You'll have to remind me what the Lib said and your other candidate said, because I didn't make a note.
Well, my recollection is they all, I'm not sure if they all specified a precise height limit, but they all, as far as I recall, they all agreed to introducing, or at least considering, the introduction of a height limit. I think they all said it should be zoned.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think they sort of formed kind of consensus, so that's a positive sign. Obviously, if they wanted to introduce a height limit, R4GV could have done it, but they didn't in the past. So, you know, they've sort of tried to blame others for that in the past, but in fact, they had the decision-making power to do that, and they chose not to. You know, if you go back to your interview in 2019, John Riggs said no more than nine stories. And he said, and he made the point, and I think it was right, that the council has no reason to accept a scheme that is not right for Guildford. There's no compelling, there's no compulsion for the council to have to accept a scheme that doesn't work for Guildford, because the council has some of the land. And so that gets quite technical and complex, but it's like if you have a plot of land which is what they call a ransom strip, so it's something that prevents people developing because you own a bit of land. And I think a bit of the bits of the land that the council own are, I think, some of the car parks that patch at the moment.
Yeah,
so they don't have to.
But my point, Robin, is the application could go to appeal, for instance, in which case the council can't do anything about it, and the time it would take to introduce height limits could be longer than it would. You don't agree?
No, I don't think that's my understanding from what I've been told. This is only what I've been told, is that height limits could be added very straightforwardly. The whole plan has got to be revised anyway fairly shortly. Let's just go back to this. So the developers got 2 options. They could either appeal against the decision, but there are 8. I mean, the Conservatives and Lib Dem councillors, long after we were asleep in our beds on the 11th of January, laid down 8 different reasons for refusal in great detail. It's going to be quite difficult if a developer wants to try and get through that. So the easier option for a developer is to wait to see what the composition of the council.
No, did you say 8? I only remember 3.
No, there are 8 points. 3. No, there are 8 points on the refusal notice, and there are lots of sub points for some of those.
So there are 8 points and sub points.
Yeah, there are sub points within each of those 8 points.
Okay, I thought it was the bus station height, and what was the third one? Oh, I thought yeah.
Yeah, those I think were the big issues. But if you look through, because what they're saying was, you know, these are against both national policies and local council policies. This is the thing that I think I didn't realise, and I'm sure most people don't realise, is that if they can come up with some way of mitigating or effectively finding a way around their own policies, if the councillors vote it through, there's nothing really that can be done about that. That planning application is then out there, and then you've got to go to a judicial review in order, if you want to try and stop.
Okay, and so that one of the strongest proponents for height restrictions during the debate on part 2 of the local plan was Ramsey Nagati from GGG. So,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
and all the parties have now said they want to review the height policy. So what I'm trying to get at is, what difference would it
That's
make
good.
if you don't vote for R4GV or GGG? They're all going to do a review
Well,
on height.
R4GV have said lots of things and then not done them once they've got
Okay,
power.
so you don't trust them
You
to
know, I mean that. Oh, absolutely not. These are guys
okay.
whose manifesto commitment is less talk.
Okay, right. Well, that's clear. So now you met with Lib Dem George Potter and Conservative Paul Spooner. What did you discuss with
Yeah.
him, and why didn't you publicise the meetings?
Well, there were two. Well, there was nothing. Well, why don't I publicise the meetings? I'm not sure why you want to publicise the meetings, but let me explain what it was about, and then you can come back to me on it. Specifically with George, basically, it was in both instances, it was to understand background, basically. But specifically with George, he brought up the whole issue of viability. So viability is the system whereby developers are basically allowed to make a profit by law. And it's determined on a sort of range of percentage. I think it's between 15 and 20% on development. And there is this argument that says that, you've got to have a big scheme because otherwise it's not viable for a developer.
Mhm.
Well, look, if the council leased me some land for £1 and I built a public toilet on it and charged £1 per visit with nice soft toilet paper, that would be viable. So it all actually comes down to what's the value of the land in the first place and what public facilities are they going to provide, right?
Yeah.
So, this goes back to your previous question, what difference would it make? And I think what we'll find is the composition of the council will be different, and therefore they'll be able to either go back to the developer or do what the Conservatives were going to do, but then got wiped out in 2019, which was put forward a bunch of different schemes so that people could do some direction finding. Say, well, this is one option. This is an extreme option in terms of density. This is completely the opposite end. And here's some variations in the middle. Combination of retail and housing. We need that site. It's a great opportunity for Guildford.
Okay, but I've spoken to Lib Dems who had no qualms about height, who didn't want to bring in a height restriction until recently, when it's become such an issue. And if you look at the track record of the Conservatives, if you look at Guildford, there have been lots of high-rise buildings already. So they haven't got good track records on this policy, have they?
Yeah, but I think that this site is very different because it is. There are two. If you want to describe what is the epicenter of the borough, it is the High Street and North Street. They're the two most important streets in the borough, and the borough is the whole economic impact of Guildford as a town spreads across the borough because people seek employment. They come in from the eastern villages, the western villages for employment. So if you really want to destroy Guildford, other than digging up all the cobbles on the high street, taking down the now broken down clock, destroying the old buildings, getting rid of the castle.
Which no one is proposing to do.
No, exactly. But if other than that, the worst thing you could possibly do is put up a bunch of tower blocks in North Street and make that the compelling image, because it's the entry point to Guildford is from that end of Guildford for most people coming into town.
But there have been other sensitive sites developed. You could call, what's gone on along Woodbridge Road, or the gateway, a main gateway in my lifetime. That has changed hugely in terms of building height. And then, of course, a lot of people mention the development back in the 60s of the two tower blocks that you can see from the High Street, Bishop's Court. I can't recall the name of the other one, but that happened on the Conservative watch. So they haven't been that sensitive to height in the past, have they?
I think those tower blocks, I think you've got to go back to the 60s, haven't you?
Yeah, that's what I said, 60s.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And
but the Conservatives were in charge.
Yeah, sorry, in the 60s?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so let's. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't see what relevance of that is.
Well, what I'm saying is they don't have these other parties that you're recommending people to vote for, or at least you're saying it's better to vote for them than it is for the independent parties.
I'm not recommending anybody.
Well, you're saying don't. I mean, if you exclude R4GV, GGG, and the Labour Party, you've only got the Lib Dems and the Conservatives left. So
and the independent candidates and the Greens.
Yeah, well,
You know,
but they're not standing enough candidates to form an administration. So
no, but hang on, Martin. Administration is not necessarily made up of a majority. It isn't currently. It's made up of a coalition.
yeah, it is a majority, isn't it? Because it is a majority because R4GV and the Lib Dems together are a majority.
Yes, that's right. And
Right.
at the next and on the 5th of May, we don't know what the composition of the council will be.
Of course, you can have a minority council, but it's not going to be formed by the other parties you mentioned because they're only standing one or two candidates.
No, but they could form part of an alliance in order to overall produce a majority. So, for example, let's say the Lib Dems and Conservatives don't win the 24 seats required to form a majority by having a coalition between themselves, let's say, then they might invite independents to join them, or they might invite the Greens to join them. We don't know. I mean, it might be the case that one of those parties does very well and manages to get a majority on their own. Yeah. We don't know. We don't know. So
why I raise this is because you said, I'm not recommending, but I'm not recommending any party. What I'm saying is, if you rule out the three parties you've mentioned, there's not a lot of choice left. But anyway, let's not dwell on that.
Quite a lot of choice, actually.
Sorry?
Okay. There is quite a lot of choice, actually. People can vote independent in most. Well, I mean, I'm in Merry. There's an independent candidate here.
Yeah, that's one. But there aren't many. I mean,
no, there are. I think I'm right in saying there are 6 or 7. Is that not correct?
Yes, 6 or 7. And do you think their chances of being elected are very high?
It depends how they put themselves across. So it's possible to win as an independent, certainly.
All right. Well, anyway, so let's move on. You said that you met with George Potter to find out about the viability stuff. Why did you meet with Paul Spooner?
To understand the background of well, the local plan particularly, to try and understand what the history was, because there were various allegations made by R4GV about things that had gone in the past. I just wanted to understand really what the background was. So how much consultation was there on the local plan? Actually, quite a lot. I think Paul said about 6,000 people took part in that consultation. So unlike here, where
I think my recollection, it was about 10,000 or 8,000.
Okay, well,
8,000 it could have been, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, it was a lot of people.
There were two phases, a lot of consultation, which contrasts from what's happened here when there's been very small amounts of consultation on the North Street plan. I mean, I posted stuff on Nextdoor, the social media site where people congregate who are interested in local issues, and people were saying things like, "I live just around the corner. I knew nothing about this." That's the whole problem if we don't have consultation, we don't have democracy. And that is the centre of the town, the economic hub of our borough. That needs to get that right. What will change? We'll see what the composition is. But I hope what will happen is people will realise, because the campaign has created this great big awareness, that they will be very aware they've got to be accountable to people.
Okay. So did you try to meet any other councillors?
No. Well, sorry, try to meet.
To meet?
Yeah. Well, I mean, last night I was with my brother, and 2 councillors walked into the same pub.
Yeah, but I mean, did you invite any other?
Did I set up meetings?
Yeah.
No, not during the course of the campaign. No.
So only the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. You didn't try and meet an R4GV or GGG councillor to find out what?
No, but I have done, but not. I didn't try and set up a meeting with them during the course of the campaign. I've spoken to R4GV councillors, and thanked my retiring local councillor for the work that she put in terms of communication, and wished her the best, because I do wish people the best when they move on from local politics, because I'm completely aware of the pressures that put on people for very small amounts of money.
Okay, but you didn't mention these meetings and any of your campaigning.
well, Paul Spooner was only last week anyway, so I haven't put anything
right?
out about that.
And
You know,
George Potter.
a few weeks ago. No,
But
I
my
didn't have
understanding is that
information.
no one in his party, well, certainly the chairman of the party didn't seem to know that he had met with you.
Yeah, I don't know the internal issues on
Okay,
with the
fair
Lib
enough.
Dems. I met the chairman of the Liberal Democratic Party outside your hustings actually, and we had a chat
Yeah,
the other
okay.
night. I mean, I will talk to you. I mean, I will happily talk to anybody, and it's important from my point of view. The other part of this is important for both the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives to understand that I am not supporting either one of them or anybody else in terms of I don't have a bias. It is literally. I mean, as I said to you before, I'm a Guildfordian Democrat. If you want to define it, if you cut me in half, it says Democrat down the middle. Okay, I looked at when I started down the road. I looked at every possible option in terms of how could I campaign with this scheme. But what I'm really after in the big picture, what I'm really after is to promote the cause of democracy, because better decisions, more accountability results, the more people that are involved in understanding what's going on. That's why I've said to you, I really support what the Dragon is doing, because you are pushing out information to people. It's only getting to a tiny proportion of the electorate, but it is at least a great effort in that regard.
Yeah, okay. I mean, last month we had 45,000 visitors, so it's not that smaller a percentage of of the electorate. But anyway, let's not.
Well, okay. Do you
But
want me? Did you want to comment?
so I was speaking this wasn't planned, but I happened to speak to two chaps who know a lot about Guildford planning last night, and they thought your campaign was good, and that they agreed that many people in Guildford were unaware of what was going on before, and that you have reached people that hadn't been reached before. But they thought mention of the previous careers of Joss Bigmore and John Rigg and the way you did it was below the belt. What do you say to them?
Okay. So, well, we covered this before, and I don't think you quite. I don't think I'm explaining it very well. Maybe. I'll give you an example. Okay. Now, I used to run an IT company, and I sold my shares in that about 18 years ago. I have loyalty to that company. If I was a councillor on the council and they were a potential bidder for an IT contract to supply the council with something, I would have to, as a matter of ethics, completely exclude myself from any involvement in that. Why? Because I would feel favour towards those guys, and they might expect favour or imply that they expected favour. It would not be right. This is public money, and there is serious amounts of public money. I think Tom Horwood said that the council's value of assets, and I think this was just housing related, is about £1 billion. So you have to ensure that the ethical conduct is. Now, in most councils, to my understanding, you would not have people who have got interests in either current or historical involved in those sorts of processes at that level. Okay. Now,
Okay.
if this is a question, only of ethics. In all the time that I've been working on this, which is now 4 months, nobody has come forward to me with any evidence of any corruption, right? In terms of money changing hands. That is not remotely what I'm implying. And every time anybody has asked me about that, that's exactly what I've said. They've
But
asked me privately.
you can see from the comments, you must have seen from the comments, Robin, that is
Yeah.
exactly what people have inferred.
No, I don't think it. I don't think it
Well, I've
is.
seen
If
comments
you
that
look,
say, yeah, the whole thing stinks.
oh, yeah, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that there's corruption there, does it necessarily?
Well, I think they've actually explicitly said corruption, yes.
Well, if they've got evidence of that, I'll give them the same advice I've given
No,
to
but
anybody.
they've inferred it from your video.
No. Hang on a second. At every point, I've made it very, very clear. I'm not suggesting this is about ethics. It is about ethics. It is about not having conflicts of interest. So, for example, Nikki Ackley has said she will not sit on a planning
Yes.
committee, and that's a great commitment.
Because
She's absolutely,
we went to her and asked her. That's why
yeah,
that came out. Yes. Isn't that the
yeah, and
way to do it?
that's exactly the way she did it. So, therefore, by the same token, why has John Rigg been councillor for Regeneration for that period
He's
of
never
time.
hidden. He's
So,
never hidden his Savills background,
no, I'm not suggesting he's hidden it.
right?
It's a conflict of interest. It's a potential conflict of interest. So the
Okay.
question for those guys is, how are they dealing with that? What safety mechanisms are they putting in
I
place?
understand. So do you think that do you think that no one with career backgrounds in property development or finance should be allowed to be councillors?
no, not allowed to be councillors, but you can't have, if you want to maintain the sort of ethical standards that are expected, then you wouldn't have kind of exclusive executive control for long periods of time, for example, over planning and development and regeneration policy. No, I mean,
So,
absolutely not. You wouldn't expect.
right. But you're aware, are you, that a Conservative executive member in a previous administration had a background in chartered surveying and has considerable property interests in Guildford?
Yeah, I was, and I asked Paul about that,
And
he said it was for a limited, well, and this is Paul's assertion, okay, and he can dispute this if he wants to, but what he said to me was it was for a very limited time under very tight supervision, which is, I think.
But at the time when he was appointed, which wasn't under Paul Spooner's leadership, it was said openly that he was being, because he went straight onto the executive as soon as he became a councillor, and it was said that they wanted to use his experience with his property knowledge, which we've used in the Guildford Dragon here, because he does have a lot of property knowledge, especially in the commercial sector in Guildford. Is that wrong?
Yeah. If you've got executive control over planning or development, and it's for long periods of time, particularly, yeah, it's a problem.
Okay.
Because there are going to be ethical questions asked, and it provides an overhead for the council, because they've got to be having very tight scrutiny on somebody in a position like that.
Okay, but
do
you accept that John Rigg had no say in the appointment of Savills as the agents for the developers, and it was actually done?
I've no idea.
Sorry,
I've no idea. I've no idea, to be honest. I don't know.
Okay, well, I've asked him, and he said.
Yeah, I mean,
just let me explain what he said. He said that they were appointed by the developers before he was invited to the first meeting at the council about this development.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not. I feel like I'm being asked to respond to an accusation I haven't made. I've no idea what.
No. Why I'm asking is, do you accept that he didn't have a hand in the appointment of Savills for the developers?
I have no knowledge of that. I'm sorry. I don't know how that was.
So you don't accept it. You just say you don't know.
I have no information on it.
Well, I've just given you some.
I put in a. Well, okay, if that's true, if your assertion is true,
it's not my assertion. It's not my assertion. I've gone and asked, and that was the response I got. And I'm wondering if you accept that.
I accept that I can accept that I can hear what you're saying, and yes, if that's true, of course, it's true. Right? I mean,
it sounds pretty equivocal, though, doesn't it?
Let me just clarify the point here. So, for example, I put in a freedom of information request, which you've got a copy of. And I asked about all the different meetings and asked for copies of minutes from the council. Okay, so here are all the minutes that I got. None. Okay, I have no idea what went on. Right? They didn't send the minutes. They were given an official freedom of information request, and they failed to provide the information. You know that. You've read a FOI. I have no idea what's gone on.
Okay, all right. And what about, I mean, Josh Bigmore wasn't employed by anyone in the property sector. So what would be your ethical guidelines for people that had a financial background?
Well, I mean, if your family are in the same business, you've got a historical background, that's a related issue, isn't it? How
is it related?
Well, I don't know, if your wife, for example, has a property company of some type, property interests, is that
where are these property interests then?
Well, Josh's wife has a property business.
Okay, so but lots of people have property in Guildford, don't they?
No, business, not I own property in Guildford, but
Right.
it's
So
not.
would you allow anyone who's a landlord in Guildford to be on the council?
Yes, be on the council. Yeah.
But you wouldn't allow them what then?
Again, if you have executive power, decision-making power over property-related stuff, then you have an potentially ethical problem.
Okay. So regardless of whether
Josh describes himself. Look, Jonathan Bigmore describes himself on his LinkedIn profile as a leisure investor. We've got the Spectrum Leisure coming up because there are huge problems with that. So the plan to build that on Stoke Park is going to come up. He's a leisure investor, so he shouldn't be involved in that, should he?
but
I know he's going to meetings about that.
Right. So, but you know that at the beginning of every planning meeting, or in fact, I think any council meeting, people are asked if they've got any interest to declare.
And have they all been declared? I don't know, but it doesn't mean just because
You
you
never
declare
prove a
them.
negative. But what I'm saying is that there is a system there for people to recuse themselves if they have an interest in that particular issue, and we have seen that done. We've seen that done.
Have we? So, but why is a leisure investor who's the leader of a political party in control of the council having meetings with the Spectrum?
Well, without knowing the details of his investment and where it is, it's difficult to know, isn't it? I mean, if he's, I don't know.
Do you see the problem? You
No,
still
I
don't
see
any
problem if he has no interest in Spectrum.
Well, like you just said, you can't prove a negative, can you?
Right. So, but then you couldn't about any of the councillors, could you?
No, well,
okay.
With a little bit of
it just sounds
with a little bit of research.
But
with a little bit of research. Does it? I mean, you're a journalist, Martin.
No,
really?
Come on. I hadn't finished what I was saying. It all sounds a bit conspiracy theorist.
What do you mean conspiracy theorist?
Well, because you haven't got the evidence, and you're therefore, it's conjecture.
What evidence?
Someone has said you haven't got any
evidence. It's in the public domain. We know that John Rigg worked for Savills.
Yes, but we haven't got any evidence. We haven't got any evidence of improper conduct.
No, exactly. That's not what we're talking about here.
All right. Now, you've suspended your normal business activity. How can you afford to run this campaign?
Because I started early. I ran an IT company until I was about 35. And when I sold my shares in that, I was in a position where I didn't need to earn a full-time income to the extent that, other people of that sort of age would typically have had to. So ever since then, I have put a proportion of my time into political and social issues campaigning. So that's why. So yeah, I'm just in it. I mean, one thing I should add to that. One thing I should add to that, so just to put it properly in context, I've never taken a penny from anybody for any campaigning I've ever done, apart from somebody paid me some expenses for travel because I had to lug equipment up to London and things like that. So I was recompensed for out-of-pocket expenses, but I've never charged a penny for the campaigning that I've done. I do it because, frankly, I would rather try and do some social good with my time than, have a big house, have a new car, have a, I don't know, swimming pool, and I don't, up to other people, do what you want to do with your time. I don't knock anybody else for doing what they want to do, but it's actually, I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of it. And so that's why I've done it for such a long period of time.
Okay. Now, your father is a retiring R4GV councillor. Is he happy with the campaign?
With my campaign?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think he feels as others do that it's illuminated a lot of the issues because there's he and other people had no background in politics at all, hadn't thought through a lot of the ethical issues and what it would involve. He didn't expect to get elected. It was the biggest shock of the night was for him.
Well, it wasn't the biggest shock of the night, but anyway, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, you're a lot closer to it.
Yeah.
For my family, it was the biggest shock of the year.
There were lots of shocks that night. It's true. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, And so from his point of view, yeah, I mean, he's had a difficult time with it himself in terms of coming to terms with the fact that the things that I'm saying, yeah, he accepts that, that is the case, that is true. And therefore it's difficult for him, but yeah, no, but he's been very positive about the things that I've said and done. Yeah.
Okay, so what are you going to do after the election?
Well, there are two elements, I think. I think the question is this: is how does the country largely, but this borough, ensure that we have proper democratic accountability? That's the really big question, because we're starting to get it now in a campaign time frame, but there needs to be a longer term process. And I think the key is engagement and awareness. Now, that's something that I could do just on a localized basis and then try and spread it elsewhere. For example, one of the things that I'm looking at the moment, which I'm not sure if it comes down to exclusively announce to the Dragon, but I certainly want to be producing a film about this process and about to showcase Guildford, because I think economically what Guildford needs is exactly what some parts of the borough already have. And what I mean very specifically, so I live in Merrow, just at the top of the ridge of the North Downs, and Shear, the village of Shear, where the film The Holiday was filmed, is down in the valley there. And every weekend it is packed with people because they want to come and get a piece of the kind of history, culture, way of life from all over the world. In fact, they come. There was a group of 20 Chinese students there on Sunday. They want to get a piece of what we have. Okay, they don't just want a glimpse, as one of R4GV's councillors said that I put in the video. They really want to touch and feel it. And I bumped into Cameron Diaz there between Christmas and New Year, and that helped to spawn an idea which was spawned quite a long time ago. Because I looked at that film, the film The Holiday, and if people haven't watched it, I urge anybody to watch it. If it was filmed in Shear, or the scenes in the UK were filmed in Shear and in Godalming,
yeah,
and the surrounding area. And 16 years later, it is drawing vast numbers of people to Shear. I would like to be able to, I think there is an opportunity to be able to do the same thing, because we are knee deep in history. We are knee deep in culture. When we fix the clock, we'll also have a nice working clock in the high street. It's almost symbolic that the clock has decided to stop at this moment. It's sort of like, stop and think, people. We have an incredible opportunity in Guildford to be able to draw. You're
going to continue to promote your campaign, albeit post the election and when will be different issues, but along the same.
It's a
good summary.
It's a pro-democracy campaign. It is about why democracy works, why it makes better decisions. Because if you're making, the point of democracy is collective intelligence. The idea is that you boil questions down to, not just a binary answer, but a number of options. And then people vote for those. And you are gathering 106,000 people, or I can't remember, is it 110? I can't remember the electorate this time. You are taking all of that collective intelligence to make a decision, but that requires people having information, and that's where I think the Dragon plays an important role, and other news outlets do as well. And it's about engagement, because if people are engaged, they understand the importance. People understand the importance of North Street, because if they're like me, they live in the surrounding villages, and they know the importance of Guildford, its draw. And there are lots of people who've moved out to the further villages who've said to me, well, I don't go to Guildford as much because the shops have declined, all that kind of thing. Well, we need to reverse that. And the role I can play in that is, I'm not going to run for council. I'm not running for council, but I can probably help with that process. I'm not necessarily involved at all with the council.
Okay. The clock's against us here, Robin, but thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Are we done?
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I'll carry on myself.